in my entire life have I seen a situation when a shooting happens and then somebody completely unrelated to the shooting that just happened.
Before the screenshots, before the podcasts, before the chaos, there was calm. Charlie was at the height of his influence. Every speech drew standing ovations. Every word turned into a headline. He carried himself like someone certain of his purpose. Candace was the spark, sharp, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Together, they moved through studios and stages like twin storms, one steady, one wild. To the public, they were unstoppable. To each other, they were necessary. She gave his world color. He gave hers direction. Erica stayed in the background, graceful, deliberate, always composed. She understood that real power rarely announces itself. It listens. It learns. From the outside, everything looked flawless. The speeches, the smiles, the shared vision. But inside, small fractures had already begun to form. Tiny moments of silence where connection used to live. No one noticed then, because the light was still bright and the noise hadn't started yet. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The distance started small. A missed call, a late reply, a meeting that ended too soon. Charlie had begun to change. More careful, more guarded. He stopped sharing ideas as freely, stopped laughing as easily. Candace noticed. She always noticed. Her questions grew sharper, her tone a little colder. What are we not saying? What are we not showing? Erica stayed quiet through it all, watching the room the way one studies a storm, not afraid of the thunder, just waiting for it to hit. When Charlie and Candace spoke, their words still matched, but their hearts were out of sync. She wanted transparency. He wanted order. Both believed they were protecting the truth. In private, friends began to feel the tension. No arguments, no betrayal, just that invisible shift when loyalty turns into caution. And beneath it all, something unspoken lingered, an understanding that whatever they were building was beginning to crack, not from lies, from pressure. It began the way storms always do, with something small, a screenshot, no context, no warning, just a few words in a private chat that wasn't meant to be seen. Lost another donor, thinking of inviting Candace. That was all, but it was enough. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. X, TikTok, Telegram, private channels that suddenly weren't so private. People chose sides. Some said Candace had betrayed trust. Others said she'd finally told the truth. Charlie said nothing. Erica said less. And silence in moments like this is louder than any statement. Behind the scenes, the tension that had once been invisible became impossible to hide. Meetings turned cold. Phone calls went unanswered. The air between them grew thick with everything they weren't saying. Candace stood by her choice. She called it honesty. They called it chaos. But no matter what anyone said, the damage was done. Not because of the leak itself, but because it revealed what everyone already feared. That trust had left the room once the leak escaped. It stopped being their story. It became everyone's. Screenshots turned into theories. Theories turned into proof. Proof turned into war. Podcasts replayed the messages on loop. YouTubers slowed the screenshots frame by frame, looking for hidden intent in every pixel. On one side, those who saw Candace as brave, a truth teller standing alone against power. On the other, those who saw betrayal, a friend turned opportunist, a movement cracked open for clicks. Charlie tried to stay above it. He spoke carefully, smiling through the tension, but his eyes, they carried the exhaustion of someone trying to control a fire that had already spread. Erica remained silent, publicly calm, privately unreadable. She moved like someone who understood that the right silence can be more powerful than any defense. The noise outside grew louder, but inside, the rooms got quieter. No one knew who to trust. No one knew who had the original screenshot. And the truth, whatever it was already being rewritten by strangers online. The internet had taken sides, and once it does, there's no going back. The noise outside was deafening. Inside, it was silence that hurt the most. Charlie stopped answering calls. Candace stopped trying. They had both said too much and nothing at all. In interviews, they smiled like strangers. The warmth was gone, replaced by the stiffness of people pretending they hadn't broken something sacred. Erica filled the silence the only way she knew how, by taking control. Schedules, appearances, statements. She managed everything with calm precision. It wasn't comfort she offered, it was order. Charlie buried himself in work as if effort could fix trust. Candace turned to her audience, words, as if truth could be reclaimed by talking louder. They were all still in the same story, but reading from different pages. Some nights, Charlie would scroll through the comments in the dark, watching strangers argue about a version of him he no longer recognized. Candace would do the same, half defiant, half wounded, telling herself that doing the right thing was never supposed to feel easy. And Erica, she stayed silent, her calm now mistaken for distance. In their world of cameras and conviction, silence had become the new performance. It began with small decisions. Who spoke first? Who stood where? Who smiled when the cameras rolled? None of it looked unusual, but the balance had shifted. Charlie, once the voice of certainty, had started to hesitate. Every word felt like it might echo in a room he no longer trusted. Candace moved differently too, slower, more deliberate, as if weighing every truth against its cost. Her passion, once pure, now carried calculation. And Erica, she no longer lingered in the background. Her calm had turned to command. The same quiet that once felt respectful now felt like control. Inside the organization, lines blurred between loyalty and leverage. Old friends spoke in half-truths. Every compliment hid a question. Every meeting felt rehearsed. They weren't enemies, not yet, but they were no longer allies either. It wasn't betrayal that broke them. It was strategy. The slow, steady replacement of trust with self-preservation. The movement still looked strong from afar. The lights still shone bright, but beneath them, everyone had started rehearsing for a story that no longer felt real. It happened quietly. It always does. A new post appeared. Midnight, no caption, no context. Just a single message, buried deep in a forgotten thread. He wasn't auditing the money. He was auditing the people. 5 words. No proof. No signature. But they hit like a storm. Screenshots flooded timelines. Clips, theories, whispers. Everyone wanted to decode what it meant. Charlie said nothing. Candace went live, her voice trembling but fierce. Erica disappeared from view entirely. The internet decided that meant everything. Podcasters spun theories about hidden accounts. Journalists drew lines between donors and secrets. Fans saw patterns where there were none and missed the truths hiding in plain sight. By dawn, the story wasn't theirs anymore. It belonged to everyone with an opinion and a Wi-Fi signal. Candace's name trended beside Charlie's. Erica's was next. People weren't asking if there was a cover-up. They were asking who buried it. And somewhere in the middle of the noise, a friendship quietly died. No public fight, no final call, just silence, and the unspoken knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. When the storm passed, nothing looked broken, but everything had changed. Charlie kept showing up, suit pressed, smile steady, the picture of composure, yet his words carried a new kind of distance, like a man rehearsing his own conviction. Candace grew colder, sharper. Her fire had turned into armor. She spoke less about truth and more about evidence, as if proof could fill the space where trust used to live. Erica, meanwhile, moved with quiet purpose, her tone softer, her reach wider. Interviews, meetings, photo shoots, each one perfectly timed. She wasn't defending the movement anymore. She was the movement. From the outside, it all looked intact, but behind the curtains, loyalty had turned into choreography. Every post, every pause, every tear, carefully placed for impact. The people who once built something out of belief were now building walls around what was left. Charlie avoided the word betrayal. Candace avoided the word guilt. And Erica avoided everything in between. In the end, no one needed to say goodbye. They already had. The empire remained. The faces stayed. But the soul that held it together had quietly gone missing. When they returned to the stage, it was almost convincing. The lights, the smiles, the practiced ease. It looked like nothing had changed. Charlie stood tall again. Candace laughed on cue. Erica stayed composed, every gesture measured. The audience wanted the illusion back, and they gave it to them. No one asked about the messages anymore. No one mentioned the leak. It was easier to pretend the storm had passed than to admit it had become the weather. Behind closed doors, their words felt rehearsed. Every conversation ended one sentence too soon. Every glance carried a quiet memory of what they couldn't say aloud. Charlie spoke about purpose, but his voice had lost its warmth. Candace spoke about truth, but it sounded like defense. Erica spoke about legacy, and for the first time, people listened as if it were hers to define. The cameras captured everything, the smiles, the poses, the unbroken facade. But what they couldn't capture was how far far they'd drifted. They didn't hate each other. They didn't forgive each other either. They just continued. 3 names still bound by one story, performing what used to be real. No signature, but they hit like a storm. Screenshots flooded timelines, clips, theories, whispers. Everyone wanted to decode what it meant. Charlie said nothing. Everything had changed. Charlie kept showing up, suit pressed, smile steady, the picture of composure. Yet his words carried a new kind of distance, like a man rehearsing his own conviction. Candace grew colder, sharper. Her fire had turned into armor. She spoke less about truth and more about evidence, as if proof could fill the space where trust used to live. Erica, meanwhile, moved with quiet purpose. Her tone softer, her reach wider. Interviews, meetings, photo shoots, each one perfectly timed. She wasn't defending the movement anymore. She was the movement. From the outside, it all looked intact, but behind the curtains, loyalty had turned into choreography. Every post, every pause, every tear, carefully placed for impact, and for a moment it almost looked like peace. But peace built on silence is only ever borrowed time. Time moved, but the story stayed still. The headlines changed. The faces on the posters shifted, but somewhere between the noise and nostalgia, their story lingered, unfinished, unowned, unforgettable. Charlie's name became something larger than himself. For some, he was a warning, a reminder of how power can isolate even the faithful. For others, he was proof that standing for something costs more than it pays. People still quote him, still replay old clips from rallies, pausing at his smile as if searching for the exact moment where conviction turned into exhaustion. Candace moved differently now. The defiance remained, but it was quieter, the kind that doesn't need to shout. Her tone carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much of truth to ever trust it completely again. The leaks, the interviews, the chaos, they had all left a mark, not a scar, something deeper, a memory that lived under her skin, even when the cameras stopped recording. Erica became the quiet constant, every appearance deliberate, every word perfectly chosen. She no longer needed to prove herself. Time had done that for her. Some said she rebuilt the empire. Others whispered that she'd rewritten its history. But the truth is, none of them were villains. None of them were saints. They were just people, brilliant, proud, human, caught inside a machine that rewards perfection and punishes honesty. The movement lived on. New voices took the stage. The message evolved. The audience grew. And somewhere along the way, the origin story blurred. Old followers still argue in comment sections, fighting for their version of what really happened, but time doesn't care who was right. It only remembers who was seen. Sometimes, late at night, a clip resurfaces. Charlie on stage, Candace smiling beside him, Erica watching from the wings, her face unreadable. For a moment it feels like the past never cracked at all. People comment they were perfect together, and maybe they were, because perfection isn't truth. It's what's left behind when the truth fades. And that's the cruel beauty of legacy. You don't get to own it. It owns you. In the end, every story becomes a mirror. We see what we want to see. Heroes, villains, victims, visionaries, or someone brave enough to look it in the eye. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, raw, unfiltered, and fearless, subscribe to Luxrish, because here we don't chase headlines. We chase what's hidden behind them.